His line was cast, but nothing was biting. Inigo was having a much easier time.
Here, let me show you, friend. You have to get the fish to pay attention to you. Move your line, forth and back.
He tugged on his rod.
There, I have one now. Once you have it, pull the line.
He pulled a long green and yellow fish out of the water, writhing and flipping in the air.
This is a pickerel. This one is small, but a good catch.
It was a green to yellow gradient with an elaborate black script through its scales. The water sparkled on its body as it elegantly spun on the line.
It's beautiful. Is it? Let us wait. This is a more ugly fish that we have. Hopefully we can catch one of the blue or golden fish, said Prince Inigo as he grabbed the fish and gently removed the hook from its mouth. I will throw this one back. They taste much better when they become a few inches longer. They had around 5 or 6 fish in the basket they had brought, some walleye, a few breams, and a brown trout. It is best to fish in the morning. At night the night fish come, and they are very mean. They feed then. Do not get caught in the water after dark.
Gerald was getting very upset, since he was doing something he wasn't good at for the first time in his life. It took him no less than 20 tries to even get the line into the water. He caught himself with the hook a few times, and gayed once in the eyebrow. That one may have been on purpose. Yet he needed to not show his frustration. Befriending a prince and a senator were on his list, but he didn't expect them to be the same person. The sand on the beach beside the sea was rocky and rough, and Inigo had instructed them to remove their shoes. You do not want to get sand in them. It is very difficult to remove, he said. Gerald had wished he would have just worn the shoes and tossed them out afterwards. Gade pulled a flat, round blue fish out of the water.
Hey, look at that!
Gade was clearly proud of his catch.
There we are. Now that is a fish worth catching, said Prince Inigo. Beautiful. A blue bream, and big as well. That will be a lovely thing to eat for lunch. I do believe we have enough fish. We may continue, however, if you wish.
Gerald shook his head.
No, I've had more than enough fun fishing.
They had been out there since dawn and had spent at least 3 hours fishing by the sea. The sea was so wide that he couldn't see anything beyond the horizon, only water stretching farther and farther until it met the sky. Gerald had never been fishing before, so it took a while to get used to it. He hadn't caught anything all morning, though. Gade had caught 5 fish, but most were too small to eat, and Inigo had caught a dozen at the least. Inigo handed the basket off to a servant.
Come now, we will browse the orchards.
Gardenfell's prime export was its fruit. It was a short walk away, the vast field of trees in lines. The grass beneath them was greener than Gerald had ever seen in the Middle Kingdom. Trees with red, yellow, orange, green, and purple fruits, as well as vines and bushes. What surprised him was the lack of wheat or corn. Both were abundant in the Middle Kingdom, and were staples in every household. There were workers out, wearing wide-brimmed hats to keep the sun out of their eyes and off of their faces. The people here could obviously take more sun than he could, but he supposed everyone was vulnerable to the blazing heat if they were in it long enough. The apple burst with juice when he took a bite, dribbling down his chin. It was easily the tastiest apple he had ever eaten. Inigo came to him and put an arm around his shoulder.
What is it, friend? You have a sullen look about you.
Gerald had not even noticed.
Do I? Well, I apologize. I am so upset at the thought of having to ever leave, getting away from these glorious apples.
He had to be careful here. He had to make himself well liked, and couldn't be seen not enjoying himself.
If you think these apples are delicious, wait until you have had a woman. Come, I can take you to the royal brothel.
It must have been the 15th time Inigo had suggested the brothel. At breakfast, on the beach, playing chess, at lunch, on the streets,
in the orchard. Why is he so insistent?
During breakfast, as Gerald half filled his stomach with water between each bite, trying to cool his mouth from the heat of the food, Inigo had told him about the mysticism of the North.
You must engage your whole body to achieve bliss, he had said. You use your mind for chess, your eyes for books, your mouth for food, your ears for music, yet you believe it is shameful to use your skin for love as well?
Gerald had to insist that wasn't the case. The Northern Prince went on about auras, stars, and other planes. Inigo insisted that he had been taken to another world while listening to a lute player, and not metaphorically. When you take a woman, you will be taken to another world as well, and your aura will be cleansed, he said. He figured he would have to give in at some point. Of course, Gade was imploring him. Yeah, you should. I was at the brothel, and let me tell you, the women here are delightful. Simply delightful, your highness, Prince Inigo. Just wonderful. Gade was gesturing with his hand as though he were describing a delicious plate of stew. Gerald wondered where Gade had learned courtesy. He was dressed up today, wearing dark blue and gray silks instead of his usual brown leather. He half sounded like he was joking or mocking, but if he was, Inigo did not notice. Yes, please, listen to your friend. If it is not women you want, we have men too. Tall, hairless, lean, all sizes to your preference. Gade stood behind Inigo, with a colossal smile on his face, wide-eyed, sticking his tongue out at Gerald. He had quite enough of Gade, and he supposed he could both get Prince Inigo off of his back about visiting a brothel and let out some frustration at the same time. Yet, he still hesitated. I agree, Prince Inigo. I will go, with a woman, after I present my cause at your Senate hearing today. No, you must go now, he insisted. You must relieve your stress. You cannot be tense when presenting to the Senate. It will be bad for your health, and your aura in turn. You are my friend, and I love you. Please, lay with a woman. He had to think of something, and quick. What could he say, though? I don't want to interrupt my wonderful tour. No, Inigo wouldn't have bought that. He would cancel the rest of it and put it off for another time. He couldn't say he liked men, because there were men brothels too, he just found out. He wasn't feeling well the last 3 times, and he wasn't in the mood 4 times. He just spat out whatever he could think of. I want to take my time, get in it, really feel it. I want to take hours and hours. I want my aura to be scrubbed, and I mustn't be rushed. It is the only way I can be satisfied. Part of him died when he said that. He felt so gross. Yet, Inigo seemed to buy it. Yes, I understand. I get that way sometimes as well. Sometimes it is best to go slowly. And you must be so ready for it as well, after your long journey, and all the days you have been here without it. He had bought himself a few hours. The Senate room was a palatial round pavilion, held up by large sandstone columns. It was built on a high cliffside, overseeing both the kingdom and the sea. There were 14 lofty platforms where the 12 senators, the king of Gardenfell, and an ebony-skinned man sat. Each one had their own. Gerald himself was seated on Inigo's platform along with Gade and a few of Inigo's advisors. Gerald had noticed a woman across from him on the other side of the pavilion, seated in a large white decorative chair. She was staring at him with big, hungry eyes, and shifting in her seat. She wore a blood-red, gold-trimmed gown, low cut, showing off her large bust, the fabric hugging every curve of her body. She would grab a lock of her long, bouncy hair and give it a tug every once in a while. Then his eyes shifted to the ebony man. He was surrounded by others with black skin like his, whispering to each other. One stood closely by him with a cup that he sipped confidently whenever someone said something mildly inflammatory. The man in the seat whispered to no one, nor did he move. He was bald, without a trace of hair on his face, adorned with golden jewelry and chains going through his ears and nose and eyebrows. His nose and eyebrows were painted red, and his cheeks were blue. Everyone with him wore the same paint. Gerald leaned over to Prince Inigo. "Who is that guy?" he asked through the corner of his mouth. "That is Agamamusa, son of Domamusa of the Mandrill Trading Company. He pays very well to sit here and observe. He rarely says much, though," said Inigo, stroking his mustache. Gerald had never heard of any Mandrill Trading Company. He was annoyed at that, because they might have been involved in his plans had he known. Still, the man was adorned in a lot of gold, more than anyone else, even the king. "You have probably never seen anyone with black skin, have you? And you must have thought we were dark here." "What is the Mandrill Trading Company?" he asked, plainly.
You do not know? Of course, why would you? They would not get to the Middle Kingdom, since the sea never reaches it. A small port town named Linport did touch the glimmering sea, but Gerald's plan was dependent on people not knowing their geography. They are the most powerful company on the glimmering sea. They have ships, thousands of them, entire armadas, both trading vessels and warships. If any land touches the glimmering sea, the Mandrill Company is there. They are here to make sure that any decision will not hamper trade for them. Gerald wondered why they never came to Linport. It was well hidden by a stretch of mountain that sank into the sea, but still. Though he recalled the rocky waters could barely float a fishing vessel, let alone a trading galley. Gerald's eyes crept towards the woman, and she was staring at him still. She was casually and subtly tracing her face with her finger, slowly running it across her cheeks and lips. He tried to pretend that he wasn't staring back, scanning the entire room and every other platform, sometimes staring longer at one. Everyone here looked the same to him, in that they all had the same color skin, same color eyes, same color hair, save the elderly. In the South, they shared skin color, yet their eyes could be blue, green, brown, and everything in between, and their hair could be anywhere from black to white. These people were all different from each other, for sure, yet they all had features in common. One of the senators was a young man with a smooth face, wearing bright sky blue and yellow, laughing and drinking with his advisors. Another was a beautiful and menacing woman in orange and yellow, leaning on a balustered railing, scanning the room herself. Another was an old man whose skin had deep grooves carved by age, yet his hair remained black. One of them reminded him much of himself, a girl with short hair, smirking as she sat with her legs crossed and touching the very tips of her fingers together. "Now watch," said Inigo as he pointed to his left towards an old, silver-haired woman, a gaunt, bearded man, and the menacing woman leaning on the railing. "Those three are from the first, second, and third estate, respectively. They are the tribunal, and together they hold more power than my father the king himself. They are called consuls, and the next three are the praetors." That would mean the woman making eyes at him was a praetor. "The last six, which includes myself, are the magistrates." What a waste, he thought. All of this tangled, cluttered mayhem. Why not just have a king and skip all of this nonsense? Sharing power never works. In truth, Gerald had already known all of what Inigo was teaching him. He had studied at length the politics of the North. They had 12 estates, what they would call a province or hold in the South, and a magistrate would be elected to represent that estate. It was based on a system from far north, past the vast desert and beyond the glimmering sea, an empire larger than had ever been seen in the world. That place had long since been destroyed by individuals seeking power, undermining or assassinating those with whom they shared it. It was that same doctrine that would destroy Gardenfell as well, he knew. Those under this ancient system were ruled by an emperor at first, but quick deaths and moronic, easily influenced heirs led to the creation of democracy, the inefficient, time-consuming chaos that gave the small folk the illusion of power. Commoners would vote for a chicken to rule them, if given the choice. What do commoners know of such lofty things anyway? It was a silly system, and a colossal waste of time. The one doctrine that intrigued him was one that had occurred during times of war, but that would be difficult to see while he was here. Gardenfell was isolated from the far north by a great desert, leaving the sea the only way to attack them. The Seven Holds had no navy that he knew of, and anyone who had bad intentions would probably be destroyed by the Mandrill Trading Company. Besides, the king himself held the Sula ship. That was the key, the king. If any war erupted, the Senate would be completely bypassed, and all power would go to the Sula. Not even the tribunal could veto the decision of the Sula. The king had begun the hearing. The longer it went on, the more Gerald was convinced democracy was a mistake. "We've been raising rulers from birth for centuries upon centuries, and we've been fine. How can they feel accomplished arguing like this for hours and hours?" Gerald listened intently to their concerns, though, regardless of how boring it was. It was many of the same things that they had talked about in the council chambers in Linwood, except here every one of them had power. Back home, his father had dismissed all his grandfather's advisors. He would listen to the input of his children,
his trusted knights, and his wizard, but the final decision always fell to him. This king was simply a host for the real rulers. Even more than their arguing, he studied them. The old-looking man's face grew more impatient the longer the hearing went on. He wants this to end. He's likely a senator for the perks and not the duties. The silver-haired woman was scribbling notes on a piece of paper. This one, however, she takes her work seriously and likely muses over her notes. The girl with the short hair liked talking the most, he figured. A lot of time was taken up by her both asking questions and answering them. Getting these morons to fight will be easy. He had tricked people into fighting before. He got his father to bring a ham to Lord John's winter feast, and that nearly split the realm. Through some body gestures, faces, and some leading questions, he got his sister's betrothed to run away. That one made him laugh whenever he thought about it. He even managed to get his two siblings to hate each other. He felt bad about that one, but only a little. They were both dumb and easy to fool. You don't even need to lie half the time. Making them realize the truth of who everyone else actually is makes them filled with hate well enough. Then came time for him to speak. He took his time walking down the staircase to the center of the room that had a round blue rug. He began his speech, speaking slowly, precisely enunciating each symbol. My friends, good senators, your majesty, allow me to introduce myself to you all. My name is Prince Gerald of the Middle Kingdom. I have traveled through fields and mountains, rocks and plains, hills and deserts, and have seen many people, both big and small, strong and weak, old and young. But I have yet to come across such a kind people as yourselves. So, from the Middle Kingdom and myself, I want to offer my sincerest gratitudes to you all, and especially Prince Inigo, who has acted as my guide all this time. That ending part was important. There had to be a point to all of that rambling. As long as it was a compliment, some would be happy to hear it all, and the length itself would give the illusion of sincerity. He looked at each of them in a random pattern, both to engage them and to check their reactions. He went on, babbling about the bonds of friendship and the necessity of good relations and all the Middle Kingdom had to offer as far as goods. He had taken a half an hour before he got to the carpet makers. Then suddenly, the old man shouted, "Get on with it!" The silver-haired woman snapped back immediately. "He is presenting his case, Dan. You should be paying attention instead of nodding off every 5 minutes. This soon? Gerald had to hold back a chuckle. The woman in red with the hungry eyes called to him. Please do not take offense, handsome prince, she said, leaning over the railing, giving Gerald a clear view down her shirt. Your voice is beautiful and your speech is precise. I could listen to you all day. She shot him a wink. Gerald wasn't sure how to feel about that, but he tucked that affection away for later use if the need arose. Not you too, Luciana. We've been here for hours already. The sun is going down and I have not eaten since lunch, shouted Dan. Silence, you fool, shouted the silver-haired woman, slamming her hand on the arm of her chair. You have insulted our guest and are now wasting the time that you claim to covet. Shut your fucking mouth, you fucking bastard. The entire room went silent for a moment before the short-haired girl said, Please continue, Prince Gerald. Our apologies for the interruption. Of course she would be the first one to talk. That girl spoke so loudly and boldly, and was responsible for most of the time that was taken up. If he continued to speak so long himself, the vitriol towards him might become more common among the Senate. So having another talk was preferable. He shouted up to her, Lady Senator, tell me a little about your estate. The little part he threw in was to absolve him from what would happen next. Her name was Joanna of the 8th Estate. Her estate was inland, far from the sea, next to the desert. She insisted that they created fine jewelry and adornments, and that they had many beautiful stones that had magical or mystical effects. She took no less than half of an hour to explain it all. By then, the sun had sunk below the horizon. The silver-haired woman called to Gerald. "For how long do you intend to visit with us, Prince Gerald?" "Oh, as long as necessary, Lady Senator. I have grown so fond of this place. It will be hard to ever leave," he said earnestly. "No, too much. Too sweet." "Though the culture is a peculiar one, it is one I am quickly learning to appreciate." Tempering the compliments with mild insults ensured that no one would think him suspicious. He wanted to flatter, to be sure, but he didn't want to lay on the honey too thick. Too much was likely to make one sick. "Then I hope you do not mind that we finish this hearing on the morrow." That was preferred. The longer he could draw it out, the more he could learn about these fools and how to manipulate them. The room began to clear, but that same woman was staring at him, the one named Luciana. She beckoned him closer with her finger. "Who does she think she is? She can't tell me what to do." Even so, he went up the stairs and onto her platform timidly. He caught himself and furrowed his brow and slowed his pace. He was the one in charge, not her. "Well, Prince Gerald, you're quite gorgeous. Just look at you." He wasn't sure how to take that. He figured compliments were given so that another would be given in return. He wasn't in the business of complimenting women too often, though. "Why, thank you, Miss Senator. You gave me quite the view as well. That dress flatters you." "Come, sit beside me." "No. I would love to, but I promised Prince Inigo that my time was his after the hearing." "My brother can wait. I will talk to him and explain. Please, come. I want to look at you more closely." "It's well past time that I made some demands in return." "What is your name, if you don't mind me asking?" "I am Juliana Guevara. Would you like to come to bed with me?" That's quite forward. Yet, that would get Inigo off of his back about visiting a brothel. Then again, this was his sister. But then again, pitting two senators against each other would be fun. Yes. Welcome to the Storytime Saturday podcast. I'm TGD, your host. This chapter, we finally see Gerald working his magic in the north. To tell you the truth, as I was running through this the first time taking notes, I hate this chapter. I don't know what it is about it. I guess it's just boring. I don't like this chapter at all. So let's go over the writing aspect. It starts off with his line was cast, which has like the same rhythm and kind of rhymes with the rook went clack. And to tell the truth, I hate that line. It's awful. I'd never do that again. Inigo says the nightfish are mean, and that's actually an important plot point when he says that. So keep that as a mental note. When he goes to the Senate room, it's described as a palatial round pavilion, which basically means it looked like a Greek temple. But in the context of this universe, it wouldn't make sense to say it looked like a Greek temple. And I'm worried about in books like these, and in fantasy books like these where it's like a separate universe, a different world, I'm worried about putting stuff like that in these stories. Like, I wouldn't say he wielded a katana, because a katana is Japanese. Like, katana is a Japanese word. So, am I saying Japan exists in this universe? Of course, if you keep, like, breaking that logic down and splitting it, the likelihood that it's absurd to think that any given planet in a separate universe, wherever these stories happen to take place, that they would end up speaking English and have like similar cultures and similar cultural norms as the real world. But still, the principle applies. Like, I don't want to say he sported a mohawk, because a mohawk, the hairstyle is named after an American Indian tribe. So why would I, like, do these native tribes exist in this universe that it's called a mohawk? Like, that the etymology's there? It's just something that I'm like, I nitpick myself about. Now, when he's talking about why the Mandrill Trading Company doesn't go to the Middle Kingdom, I had to write in some goofy landmark like the mountains came down out into the sea and the bay is rocky in Linport. Now, obviously, it would be easier to just terraform and put dirt in the bay until the rocks are covered up and build a port city there to get stuff from the north rather than digging a tunnel through the mountain. But like I've mentioned, this is what happens when you don't have a plan, when you start writing something and don't have a plan for where it's going to go. This northern democracy is so goofy. The tribunal, the praetors, consuls, and magistrates. What does any of this mean? I have no idea. And one more thing, this lady that's horny for Gerald, literally, at the very end of the chapter, the one named Luciana, he asks her name, she says, I am Juliana. So is her name Luciana or Juliana? I don't even know how I let that slip through. Like, that's extremely embarrassing. That's the most embarrassing thing, probably in the whole book. The most embarrassing mistake. That her name's Juliana and Luciana. But anyway, let's talk about Gerald a little bit. He has this long expositional piece in his head that he's like just explaining, thinking about this system of government, and that's basically just ancient Rome. And relating to his character, he says, why not just have a king and skip all of this nonsense? Sharing power never works. And that the system of government would be the undoing for Gardenfell as well. So this was the idea, I think, at the time I wrote this. The idea was Gerald would sow discord among the Senate, causing a civil war or something, and somehow Gerald would become the Sulla, which just means dictator. Of course, the Mandrill Trading Company throws a wrench in that plan. I don't know if there's any more. I think there's another Gerald chapter after this, and I'll go into the absolutely stupid plan I had for Gerald after this chapter. But Gerald's, like, his full character is finally coming into the picture. We finally see who he actually is. We see that he's a complete psycho. So we learn that he even managed to get his two siblings to hate each other. The distrust between Jeffrey and Georgine is all Gerald's doing. It was me, Barry. I made your betrothed run away so that you wouldn't think you were the smartest sibling. It was me all along. I put the idea of bringing a ham to the winter feast in your head so that grandfather would fight you. It's his hobby to sow discord and make people hate each other. So he's a complete psycho. And as much as I hate this chapter, like, Gerald is kind of fun. It's actually fun seeing him play his manipulation game, and his mental process is like, no, that's too sweet. I can't go on about how fond I am of this place. That's too suspicious. So he tempers it. He says, the culture's a peculiar one, tempering the compliment with like an insult, so he doesn't seem too suspicious. Trying to make it more realistic. So at the end of the day, really, I was really scrambling with this book. I think it was like, this was probably January of 2018 when I was writing this part. It was honestly just really a grind. I was just grinding just to get words on the page. This is basically like literary wandering. Like, if you get lost in the woods, if you have a compass, you at least know which direction you're going. I didn't have a literary compass because I had no plan of where I wanted to go. So this is just wandering here. This is a big waste of time, what happens here. Because I think the plan was, with all this stuff, Gerald's entire plan was gonna like just get thrown into the water and fail. So all this setup was basically for nothing. So I would subvert expectations. I don't think any of this was gonna go down. So all of this was a waste of time. This was really just literary wandering. And at this point, I figured that the book was about a third of the way done. So this is like 55,000 words in this Gerald chapter, and the book had to be at least 150,000 words, if not 200,000. So we weren't even close to the end, and I was just like, oh, I gotta get the word count in. Ooh. So I'm not sure how these other chapters are. I don't think they're any better. I think the rest of them are all grindy like this. I think the writing drops. Like this, the writing in this one is bad. Like I don't even get adjective order right when I'm, to go back, be a bit monkey brained here. The adjective order isn't even right. Like seated in a large white decorative chair. Like the adjective order is not correct. Like it should be decorative large white chair. Like that's a mouthful. 3 adjectives to describe the chair. 3 adjectives. Look at the adjective. Yeah, this completely fell off. So I'm not sure that it gets any better, but next week I think we start to see the plan with Jeffrey. I think the plan for Jeffrey was that he just kind of goes crazy and disappears. So that's what's next week. We go back to the Middle Kingdom and see Jeffrey. I think we get a little bit more insight into his plan, the plan for releasing all the prisoners. Yeah, guys, we're getting down to the wire, and sorry, like this isn't going to end in a satisfying way. It just like peters off and gets worse. Sadly. But that's really the point of all this, is to it's a long explanation and a show of what happens when you don't have a plan. But that's been the Storytime Saturday podcast this week. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you come back next week. Make sure you like the video if you're watching on YouTube, and subscribe, like wherever else you may be watching this, and I'll see you next Saturday.